going?
Good. Well, hey, you know what? We're here to learn how to catch more fish with swim baits. All right.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah, the swim bait king himself, Byron Velvick, two-time U.S. Open winner, bass record holder. I mean, you've done it all with swim baits, and we all want to know those secrets. How does that happen? You know, how do you catch more fish using swim baits, bigger fish? We want to know how this gets done. Now, you know, to lead into the segment, you know, Livingston Lures, we got a lot of new baits coming down the line, you know, a lot of new exciting things, but we all just want to learn how to catch more fish. Now, history of swim baits. Bring us through your background in swim baits and really what made you the swim bait king and pioneer.
I don't know about that. There's a lot of guys that really were there at the beginning of the swim bait craze, and really back then there wasn't really a name for it. It wasn't like we were throwing things that we were all calling swim baits to each other, so we had nicknames for it. You know, it was an evolution of guys that lived in Southern California like myself that were going out saltwater fishing, catching calico bass, white sea bass, sand bass, yellowtail. You know, and at the same time we were bass fishing, and they were stocking these trout in these little lakes around Southern California. And there was a core group of hardcore guys that I grew up with that were crazy about taking some trout imitation baits and throwing things that look like trouts, saltwater baits that look like trout to get big bites. And I kind of took it into the tournament thing. I started fishing tournaments, and I took my love and my passion of the big bait to tournaments, and freaked a lot of my friends out because when I won Clear Lake the first time in 2000, I had been secretly throwing a big bait for quite a while and catching a lot of fish on it, but having to pretend as though it was a fluke or an accident. And then at Clear Lake, I just went, you know, daylight to dark, you know, 3 days straight, you know, and I won that tournament by over 10 pounds because those fish had never seen it. Back then it was incredible. Big fish were just completely freaking out at big baits because nobody out there was throwing them. So you can imagine it was like Dave Levy when he started pitching or flipping, or D. Thomas when they started pitching or flipping. You know, you're showing these fish something they just never saw that was artificial. So they smoked it. So it started. It was a fun start going big baits in tournaments.
Awesome. You know, I mean, that thing, you know, talk a little bit about how big baits have really, you know, specifically, you know, this year, really on the tour, you know, unfortunately to take some time off there from the tour, but, you know, big baits, the way you go out, you know, you are the hero of big bait fishing on the Elite Series, and how that helps you compete. I mean, your mindset going into those tournaments, those big baits.
You know, I'm always looking for fish that are foraging on larger baits than usual, and you're really looking for keys. If there's a gizzard shad population, if there's, you know, the hitch like there are in California, if the blueback herring are running kind of big that year, if you're down in Florida and the golden shiner, you know, the bait guys are throwing the biggest golden shiners they can get their hands on. Anywhere I go in the country where I can find a species of bait fish that are getting mowed down in large numbers, and even if they're just floating on the surface, or, you know, if you're at Amistad and you see some dead tilapia, you know, flicking on the surface with teeth marks all over them, I mean, that's money. You know, if there's baby bass, if you reel in a 8 or 10 inch bass and a big one chases up and tries to eat it off your hook, that's money. I mean, those are the exciting times for a swim bait fisherman, because anytime you see those large bass having that paradigm shift in their head to attack a big bait more so than just the small bait, and fish do feed on a certain size at certain times. There's times where they're so keyed up on real small shad that we can't throw baits small enough. But when you're throwing a big bait, you're looking to match the hatch. That is the first thing I always tell everybody is go to the bait stores, talk to guys, find out exactly the size that they're chewing, because if you're off by an inch or 2 or 3 on a big bait, it's the difference between getting a lot of bites and hardly getting any bites. And that was real true at Guntersville this year. Guntersville, a lot of guys on the Elite Tour this year, a lot of guys on the Elite Trail this year were fishing Guntersville, and they were throwing gizzard shad baits, but they were stopping at 6 or 7 inches, and these fish were starting at 6 or 7 inches, eating gizzard shad to 8, 9, 10 inches, 11 inches, 12 inches. You know, I saw giant gizzard shad getting crushed by big bass, you know, bigger baits than I had in my boat, and that's saying something, because I got some pretty big baits in my boat. Did I lose you? It just went silent.
Live streaming, it's a part of the game. Sometimes live streaming gets hung up here and there, but it's just part of the game. Awesome, Byron. Well, you know, really one of the fan questions. This is all about Q&A. It's interactive. We're taking fans' questions off of social media. And, you know, the main thing that they want to know is, the time of year. What's the best time of year to throw a swim bait? And a hard bait and a soft swim bait. What's the best time of year, and what are you looking for in that specific time of year to throw a hard swim bait and a soft swim bait?
That is so hard, because if I tell you December's awful and you're down in Florida, December's great. December's a great time. I can't give you a month or a time other than water temperature. Water temperature is key. When those fish are coming, before they start to spawn and they start moving into the shallows, that pre-spawn time, when that jerkbait bite is starting to shut down, the water temperatures are going from the mid 40s to the high 40s into the 50s. Those fish are starting to move around a little bit more. They're suspending in the water column, and that's the time that those fish are starting to think about killing bigger baits that are, as they clear out an area to spawn. And a lot of your winter fish, like your hitch and your trout, are making a transition from the shallows to the deep. I mean, there's a real money time right there when you have hitch that winter in the shallow, and trout that like to winter, spend the winters in the shallows, coming back out as the big females are moving in to spawn, and they're looking for a big meal. They got a bunch of eggs in them. They want to fertilize those eggs. Sure, they're eating crawdads and stuff, but if they see a trout or a hitch or something swim by, that pre-spawn is dynamite going into the spawn. Obviously, I throw a swim bait all the way through the spawn. While I'm looking at bed fish, I'm throwing a swim bait out on the outside of the bed looking for fish to react. And I believe swim baits are a lot more versatile than most people realize. I think there's a new frontier. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what swim baits will be in the next 5 years, 10 years, with these young guys learning to fish them deep. I mean, there's a whole nother generation of guys that are fishing them in the dead of winter. And I love being a swim bait guy, because when you go to the shows, people come up and talk to you. I've met guys catching swim bait fish through the ice. They dig a hole in the ice. They're dropping their swim baits down in the ice, and they're pumping that swim bait straight up and down ice fishing. So they're ice fishing with swim baits. So I can't even begin to say this is when you should throw it and this is when you shouldn't throw it, because there is no time that you shouldn't throw it if the conditions happen to line up right. So don't let me tell you when not to throw it, because the next time I see one of these guys from this webinar at a boat show, they're gonna say, dude, here, look, there's a picture I've caught it. It was 42-degree water and I smoked them. I'm like, yeah, I love it, because it's still a brand new deal. It's not that old of a bait. I think it's real exciting to see what's going to happen the next 5 to 10 years with swim baits.
Awesome. Well, the main other question really, the difference between hard and soft swim baits. Guys are asking, what time of year are you mainly throwing hard glide baits between throwing a soft swim bait like a Hud or any other soft swim bait? Between the hard and the soft, really, do you have any specific times of year that you'd prefer one over the other?
When I told Livingston we're going to do swim baits, and I really begged Livingston, I'm like, please, let's do swim baits. We had to do both. And it's not a time of year thing. It's almost a speed and retrieve thing. I fish soft swim baits a lot deeper. They're easier to fish. They have a higher percentage of hookup ratio, as far as you can get away with throwing them through the trees and bouncing through trees. With those hard baits, you got treble hooks hanging all off the thing, and it's more of a glide bait, if you will. The glides are real popular, and a lot of the big topwater baits. And hard baits and soft baits go hand in hand. I have them both tied on. And when I caught them at Gunnersville this year and got second, only to skeet, I was throwing a hard bait prototype Livingston as well as that Bass Trick soft bait. Both of them played. And if I saw those fish come up blowing up on those gizzard shad, I'd throw that hard Livingston prototype out there and pop that thing through there. And I caught them, even if you watch the show, I'm catching them on the hard, and then I'm turning around and throwing that 7-inch Bass Tricks out there and letting that sink to the bottom and slow rolling it. And I'm mixing it up back and forth. And I don't, in my experience, and by no means do I think that, what I say is the only way it is by far, because there's a lot of guys that have it down in a certain way where they have a lot of confidence in one versus the other. I throw them both. I absolutely have 3 or 4 rods tied on with good hard baits and a lot of the new Livingston prototypes, and I have soft right there alongside of them, and they both work in the same application. It's like if you're on a crankbait bite, and you're catching them on crankbaits, but you're mixing it up, and you got a medium runner, a deep runner, you got a square bill, you got a coffin bill, you might have a lipless crankbait out there as well. I liken hard and soft that same thing. I can only tell you that the soft baits are a higher percentage if you're fishing tournaments.
Awesome. Well, the main thing guys are talking about how, throw a lot of swim baits and even personally me, I mean, you throw swim baits and you get a lot of followers, but you don't get those strikes. And so, a lot of guys want to know, how do you turn more followers, more swim bait followers into actual strikes? What are some key components to maybe the cadence, the retrieve, and the advent of EBS sound technology?
Well, the one thing you're going to notice with the Livingstons is they're doing something no other bait's doing. They're actually giving off a sound. And what we're noticing, we're still prototyping these. Even today, I was out throwing them. Because we have a chamber built in where the weights go into, and it's a multi-weight system. I could talk about that later. This thing actually gives off bubbles every now and then because I call it burping it, because it has a chamber in there where the weights are sitting. So it's giving off a little bit of bubbles. It's giving off sound. It's doing a lot of stuff. It's the most natural swim bait out there. And swim baits traditionally don't do a lot except create a big presence. You know, unlike a lot of other baits, they don't do a lot of rattling. They don't do a lot of noise making. You know, if it's a dirty water or overcast, you know, those fish have a hard time seeing it. The Livingston bait's going to attract a lot more fish because it actually has, you know, that technology, that EBS technology that we've all heard about and know is working. Obviously, Randy Howe keeps proving it every classic. You know, it's a technology that we all catch a lot of fish on. We're choosing that to swim baits. But to answer that question, the couple things I look for, and this is the most important thing I can say tonight in this seminar, and it's the hardest thing to practice, and I say it at every seminar I give, webinar if you will, is not only do I add scent to the baits if I can, I like to put a little scent on there and make the bait be able to have some smell to it. So if the fish are coming up behind it, they pick up something, a smell of some kind. So I like to add scent to it. But at the same time, I always stop the bait before it gets to the boat. Now that's not easy. That's easy to say, and it's not easy to do. Because if you try casting all the time and reeling it in, we are conditioned anglers and we've been fishing since we were kids. And about the time the bait gets close is when we as anglers look up and figure out where we're going to cast next. That's our next move. Did you answer? Turn one down. Which one? The speaker?
We're going to try and get rid of that echo for you guys that have been experiencing a little bit of echo. We're going to try and get rid of it here really quickly for you. But either way, we're going to stay live on here for you guys. So, you know, another way we're talking about how to turn strikes, or how to turn, you know, followers into strikers. I mean, the cadence and retrieve. So say you're throwing, you know, the new Venom, and you're throwing that glide bait, you know, what kind of retrieve are you using to get those fish to really turn them into strikers? I mean, what kind of retrieve are you using? The cadence retrieve?
That's exactly where I was going with what I was talking about, the retrieve. I like to work a bait real slow, and a lot of times with the glide baits, a lot of guys, every glide bait guys all have a little cadence that they love of their own. Some guys like to give them a little twitch. Some guys like to give them a little pull and stop. Some guys like to just straight crank it straight in and not move it at all. And as I talk to very proficient glide fishermen, glide guys, the guys that are the big bait specialists, they all have their little thing that they like to do as they're reeling it in. I'm going to tell you the most important thing I can say tonight. Stop the bait before it gets to the boat. Every single cast. And it's not, like I was saying before, the volume thing, it's easy to say and it's hard to do, because as anglers, we cast and we retrieve, and when it gets close to the boat, we think it's done and we cast again. And you will be shocked how many big fish follow that bait and you don't even see them because you're so busy. You reel up, and about the time you lift your eyes and you go to cast, that big fish is down and out behind or somewhere, and it's getting ready to attack it. But your bait fish, your big swim bait or swim bait, that fish believes in it. That fish is curious. That fish tucked up in behind it is following it. And as he's following it, he knows there's a boat there. He can hear the trolling motor. He hears the electronics. He knows that fish is headed towards a boat. The mistake anglers make is they don't do what a fish would normally do. A fish would stop before it got to that boat. It wouldn't swim right up to that boat and kiss it. It wouldn't just swim up to the hull and just jump up in the boat. I mean, that's not what a bait fish would do. A bait fish would stop and freeze, and if you stop and freeze your bait, you will get smoked. You'll get 30 to 40% more bites. I mean, more than, I'd say 30 to 40% of my swim bait bites that I've ever had come when I stop the bait close to the boat and watch out of nowhere, even if I don't see them, these fish tomahawk it because your swim bait acted like a real fish, and that turns them on. So if you want to increase your followers, if you want to get more bites off those followers, try it. But I promise you, and I tell you to say this, you go out tomorrow, you'll do it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and then you'll go back to the routine of just reeling and casting. And that's the hardest thing to do in the world for 8 hours, 10 hours. I'm telling you that because I still can't do it. I know how important it is, and I still can't stop the bait every time because I spent 30 years fishing differently than that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, you know, we all get stuck into kind of our own way of doing things. And, you know, the added of being able to stop that bait and pause that bait next to the boat, the addition of electronic bait fish sound technology is absolutely killer on the pause. and can definitely change the way that you fish with the retrieve and the added advantage of EBS sound technology. Those extra, you can turn those fish into strikers. So that's awesome. I mean, you know, we got a couple more questions coming in from the live stream. One question that's getting even more advanced here is the shad spawn. So I got a guy asking here, his name's Keaton, and he's asking, you know, how during the shad spawn do you get bites with a swim bait? He's talking, you know, soft swim bait as well as throwing a hard swim bait. You know, during that shad spawn, you downsize, throw like the 6-inch instead of throwing a larger bait. You know, what do you do during that shad spawn using a swim bait to get, you know, try and catch some more fish?
You know, the one thing I learned about the shad spawn is it's an early deal. I mean, that is a key deal early. That has to, if you identify a shad spawn, that spawn, you have to pick up on that at an early morning bite. You know, that doesn't last real long, and those fish get off that shad real quick when they're blasting them. And again, going to that shad pattern and getting those shad pattern swim baits, and because of the EBS technology, the thing with swim bait fishermen, more often than not, fish a bait too fast. You know, when I won Clear Lake the second time, I had a lot of help in that little corner I was in. The elite guys all wanted to come help me catch my fish, and I appreciate their concern, you know, thinking maybe I'd leave a few behind. So I did have a lot of friends at that tournament. What I noticed, hardly anybody caught any fish in that pocket I was in because they were reeling the baits too fast. And to Keith's question, because you have a bait that actually has EBS technology in it, sound technology in it, the slower you reel it, the better it's going to be. The better that bait does its thing. It's giving off that sound. It's giving off a spawning shad sound. You match the hatch. If the shad are real small, then a swim bait, you might have to go to a predator swim bait. Get off of the shad pattern. You know, go to a bluegill or a crappie or a baby bass pattern swim bait so that you're linking yourself in that food chain between the shad and the bigger bass. And a lot of times in a shad spawn, I will get off shad altogether, and I'll go with a brim, a bluegill, or some other forage fish that one up in the food chain that looks like he's taking advantage of the shad spawn, and you're crushing the big fish. Your big fish are crushing those bluegill and those baby bass and whatnot. So you might want to get, if you don't have a swim bait small enough that you really want to throw to that matches the shad, if they're real microscopic or it's just a regular small shad thing, try going to that what I call it the forage fish, crappie, bluegill, bass, you know, baby bass, and then throw those right in the middle of the shad spawn and watch what happens.
Awesome. No, awesome. And you know, the bait, that's one reason we created the Bee Viper, is to give you that larger bait, that crappie, that bluegill. You know, definitely you can use that bait in those situations to target those feeders. They're actually feeding on the shad or the smaller shad, and those bass are eating the larger forage bait. So that's awesome. Well, you know, another quick question,
I want to touch on that.
More specific is when you're throwing, you know, the Bee Venom and the Bee Viper, the 6 and the 8-inch. You know, what size rod and reel, line, what gear are you using to accomplish this?
Okay, you know, you touched on something real key as far as body shape size, and I know I tried to interrupt you, but with the live feed, I can't say, no, stop, Nick, I'm over here, cut. You know, the key there is that you nailed this, that the Venom and the Viper are two different profiles. You know, this is the Viper right here, and it's, I don't know if you can see that or not. I hold it up, but that's the Viper. If I see it like that, I'll get the lighting on it. That's the Viper, and it's a wider body shape. And so that shape, that body style, and that shape is going to match the crappie, the tilapia, the bluegill, obviously the shad. And then a Venom is going to be like this. That's the Venom. That's going to be the narrower one. You need to key what body shape the fish are feeding on. I mean, if they're on the blueback herring, the baby bass, you know, a lot of the hitch, they're going to be in that. They're going to be wanting that body shape right there. But then you go to those bigger, you know, the bigger, wider body, the tilapia, the bluegill, the crappie, and everything else. They're going to be the Viper. This is the Viper. This is the Venom. And you've got to know what your forage is when you're swim bait fishing. You have to know that. And a lot of fish are going to be hitting a certain shape that they're going to want more. Guys talk about the bull shad. Other guys talk about the mothers and the gancrafts and all that stuff. Well, you know, there's different body shapes, and pay attention to if it's a narrow body or if it's a wide body. And now to answer your question about tackle, you know, I use fluorocarbon when I'm fishing deep. And I use mono when I'm fishing the shallower stuff. A lot of the top waters, obviously you want to throw mono, you know, and I used to be just a straight mono guy. I really like the abrasion resistance of monofilament line. And the reason is the scary part about fluorocarbon is it shatters. It's very unforgiving. You know, if your hook nicks it and you go to throw that big expensive swim bait and you have like a slightest nick in your fluorocarbon, you just donated it to the lake. You just kissed it goodbye. It's gone. It's a memory, unless you can get your trolling over there and get it back real quick. And that's where I like a heavier line, and preferably a more durable line. And I don't throw braid hardly at all. Braid is a mess because it a lot of times it backlashes. It'll cut itself. You know, I got Skeet off of throwing it, and that cost me the tournament at Guntersville because I told Skeet the braid was a disaster. It's a mistake. And even if you have a fluorocarbon or a monofilament leader, it just cuts the baits in half. The fish, you know, they don't respond as well swimbait fishing with braid. In my world, I don't throw braid on swimbaits at all. Rods, I have a swimbait rod with ducket fishing. I have a swimbait rod that I think is pretty good. It's universal for everything as far as the bigger baits to a certain size, the tournament size. Now, when you start throwing things like this is the 8-inch. I don't know if I can show you how big
that's
that is.
That's the big boy right there.
Viper. When you take that and then you add the balls that we're putting these balls in there. So we're adding these 4-gram balls. There's 9 millimeter. There's these 9 millimeter 4-gram balls, and you put 8 or 10 of these in this thing. This thing weighs a ton. Throwing that on the swim bait rods, you better start talking about your bigger rods, you know, your ocean type rods and some of your bigger, heavy duty, big bait rods. And I tell people this when they talk about the ultimate swim bait rod. I'm like, man, you can't have one rod as the ultimate swim bait rod because swim baits start at 3 inches and go to 15 inches. So how are you going to have one rod that's going to throw a 3-inch bait and a 15-inch bait? And so swim baits across the rods, I'm going to tell you what is key. It has to have a soft tip so it absorbs the shock of the strike. It has to have a good backbone, but the mistake a lot of swim bait guys make is they have too stiff a rod. And what happens is that rod is it doesn't allow the fish to inhale the bait. And I don't care if you're talking about a 3-inch swim bait or a 15-inch swim bait. And so my swim bait rod that I have with Ducket is a great example of a soft tip, fast action, great backbone rod. And it handles all the swim baits between 5 inches and about 8 inches in my world. But if I go above 9 or 10, or if I go smaller than 5, if I get into 3 and 4, I'm off of that rod because it doesn't match the size of the bait. You know, and that's just the reality of it. But every rod I throw, whether I'm throwing little bitty swim baits or real big ones, I have a soft rod. I use a reel. I never go faster than a 6.3-to-1 reel. And the reason I don't is you can easily speed up a slower reel, but you cannot slow down a fast reel. What I mean by those 7.3-to-1s, those 9s and 10, you know, gear ratio reels, those really super fast reels, you can't slow it down enough to make a swim bait in my world look stealthy enough, you know, look wounded enough. You know, those slower reels are the key. You know, and I'll even use a 5.4-to-1 or a 6.3-to-1 reel, and I'll just slowly crank that thing along. And I can speed up a little bit, but slow is key when you're swim bait fishing. So fluorocarbon and monofilament, a good rod with a soft action tip and a quick backbone, and then a slower reel are the keys to catching more fish that actually bite your swim bait.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. We all battle with what should we use, and sometimes, you know, depending where you're from, what area you're from, you know, you could be underutilizing your tackle. You could be trying to use too light a gear to properly fish those baits and catch those big fish. Well, here's another viewer tip or a viewer question. You know, Adam here on Facebook, he asked a question about, you know, in direct sun, when that, you know, everyone thinks that swim bait fishing might be a wind driven or you know, nasty weather conditions. When it's direct sun, it's fairly slick direct sun, what way are you fishing a swim bait? What colors are you using? And that type of conditions, what do you go to when you're swim bait fishing?
You know, I learned a long time ago, and I actually had a funny day with my friend and a guy that started fishing the same year as me, Kevin Van Dam. And Kevin was just learning about swim baits, and it was overcast and windy at Amistad. And he said, boy, we're going to wreck them today on that swim bait, aren't we? And I go, man, you're not going to catch them today on that swim bait. And he says, oh yeah, this is perfect weather for swim bait fishing. Well, it's not. And at the end of that day, after Kevin found out, I can tell you straight up, man, overcast, windy days, guys that are thinking they know, you know, that's the time of weather, the kind of weather you want. You want a wind, yes, a breeze, yes, but sunlight helps with swim bait fishing. And sunlight is great. Now, the reason I'm explaining this real quick, sunlight creates that shadow. And these fish, I've caught swimbait fish that I know are down in 40, 50, 60 foot of water. And I'm slow rolling that swimbait at about 15 to 20, and they're coming up and eating it. And this happened at Amistad. And the reason I know this is because the craziest thing, I'm fishing the swimbait in that 12 to 15 range, and I'm catching these studs. And when I throw in my live well, they go belly up. I mean, they blew their bladders up. I'm like, well, how is this? I mean, I'm not fishing, but 12, 15 foot of water. Those fish were sitting 30, 40, 50, 60 foot of water, coming up quickly to get my bait, expecting to go straight back down. I hooked them, I reel them in, and those fish are their bladders never adjust. So they turn upside down. And if you looked at my live well, you swear I was either spooning or throwing a jig in 50 foot of water. That's what you would have thought. And I said, man, I'm throwing a swimbait in shallow water. They go, there's no way. Look at your fish. They're all blowed up. You know, they're all belly up. Swimbaits and sun go hand in hand. Now, when it's calm, like he's asking, that's when it gets extremely tough. Your mornings and your evenings will be key at that time. But I also learned from fishing swimbaits for a long time that I throw it in the morning till about 9 or 10 o'clock, and I will put it down unless I have a sack and I'm doing great. But I put that thing down around 9 or 10, and I just fish my normal routine, and I'll pick it back up before weigh-in, because there is a dead zone. In my world of swimbait fishing, there is a major dead zone between 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock. You know, and there's a lot of exceptions to that. I've had great days where I've caught them all day long. But even when I won Clear Lake this last time, you know, for the second time, you know, fishing that swimbait, those fish came in the morning, and then I would have to fish it all day long to maybe get a bite or two. And in the last hour and a half, as is so usual for me, at the last hour and a half, they went nuts again. They went bonkers, you know, and I'll catch them right up until the time I have to go in. So if you're learning how to fish swimbaits, I tell people, fish them in the mornings, fish them in the evenings, fish them when the sun's out. But from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I mean, you're a lower percentage bait, and yet there are exceptions to that rule. So don't believe that's the only way it is. Because I know guys will say, "Oh no, man, I've caught them all day long," and I have, but it's not the norm.
Awesome, awesome. Well, another viewer question here really is, you know, landing swimbait fish. I mean, fish tend to, you know, those big fish tend to come off on baits that give a lot of leverage. I mean, how do you keep those fish pinned when you get those fish hooked up? You know, how do you set the hook? How do you get those fish to the boat? And maybe how does, you know, what we've integrated into the Bee Venom and the Bee Viper help?
Yeah, I suggest you have the biggest net you can buy. For starters, buy the biggest net with the longest handle. Because I actually I had some friends of mine that won a tournament I was at Casitas. They had 5 fish for 60 pounds. And at the time, everybody freaked out. They were hardcore swimbait fishing guys. And back then, I was there, and they had 5 bites the whole day, and they had 2 of the fish fall off in the net. You know, it's a low percentage bait. Now, the Viper and the Venom are, you know, we're setting up the hooks a little bit differently. We have the hooks that they rotate in the body so that you get a rotation of the hooks instead of them binding up. That's key. Adding a double split ring to your hooks. And what I mean by that is, you know, you get in and you want this to sit there and rotate. You want to be able to rotate that bait on the hook so that way they can't unleverage it. So this is the Viper, but you take that bait and you spin that thing around, and you can have 360 degrees. A lot of guys like to use double split rings, but we don't have to, because that is key. That actually allows the fish not to twist off of the hook. And this is the kind of stuff you're going to want. You know, we put everything I could imagine and dream of. We put on these Livingston baits, and I'm thrilled. But that was one of the things that would keep these big bait fish on a lot longer, because they don't have that chance to use the bait to leverage the hook off as they twist it around, and that bait spins. A lot of times that bait spins and cuts right off of their mouth, and they release. So if you don't have a Livingston bait, well, you probably should get one. And if you don't have one, you better at least go double split ring, like you add that split ring and you go to another split ring on front and back. So that when you're running double split rings, and that's if you have a fixed position eyelet. So if you have that fixed position eyelet, at least give them so that they can twist it a little bit further before it catches and the hook will pop out. And that's for the hard baits. And the soft baits, you know, I think the thing with the soft baits is don't set the hook. You know, on swim baits in general, don't set the hook. You want to sweep them. But I like to use a big hook, a single hook on my bass tricks and my soft plastic swim baits. And I like to open it up a lot. I actually open it so that it'll be sitting in the body. And because it's riding through the body, I actually open it up and let it sit out so that the more of the hook's exposed. And other than reeling it in, don't set the hook, sweep into them. Don't let them jump around a lot. Try to keep their head down. Don't play the fish. I mean, you have a limited amount of time with swim baits. You know, these fish, that's a big bait. You know, if you stuck it in your hand and you shake your hand around, it's going to come out a lot easier than a drop shot hook. You put a drop shot hook in your hand and you shake it around, that drop shot hook is stuck in your hand for the rest of the day. But with a swim bait, you shake your hand around, it's going to pop. Well, bass, same way. They're shaking their heads. It's going to give. I've hooked a lot of swim bait fish where the first time they jump, the swim bait's gone down their throat. Second time he jumps, I see the head coming out. Third time, I see the bait just about out of his mouth. I've had a lot of those times where they're regurgitating that big bait and they're throwing it out before they get it to the boat. So you gotta get them in quick. You don't want to set the hook too hard, and make sure you have the right rod so at least it absorbs the shock of the bite.
Awesome, awesome. Well, another viewer question coming in. You know, fishing swim baits at different depths, specifically hard swim baits. You know, how do you change that bait specifically to get to those different depths? And, you know, how with your design help be able to, you know, change the rate of fall on those, you know, B Viper and B Venoms, you know, to be able to change those depths and change to the conditions?
I was hoping somebody would ask that question tonight. I really was. This is what's so cool about these baits, because the hard baits, glide baits, are really limited to a higher water column. And the reason is because they're a static bait. They're a hard bait. They're gliding through the water, and they have as much weight as they have is proportionate to the size of their body, whether they're made out of wood or whether they're made out of plastic or whatever. You know, a lot of the baits I had before we came out with this bait, I was adding a lot of weight to them in the belly. I was trying to weight them down because I just felt like they would ride up too much. And I want the fish that are deeper on a sunny day to be able to look up and see them. But this bait, and all of the Livingston baits are doing this, both the Viper and the Venom, you know, you pull the ring out, and as you take the bait apart, you now have a cavity where you can take and you drop the 9mm 4-gram balls in there. And as you drop those things in there, you're now changing the weight of this bait. So you're making this a deeper bait, a deeper gliding bait than anything in the market. There's nothing in the market that'll run this deep, because now I've just sat there and added enough grams to this thing to get it to drop down. And I can keep on, I can put 6 to 8 of those balls in the cavity of this bigger bait. I put the pin back in, I put it back together, it locks in, it's a locking pin. And now I got a bait that's gonna run deeper. As a hard bait, the Livingston Viper is going to run deeper, and the Venom are going to run deeper than any other glide bait out there. And what that's going to allow me to do is get that noise and that size of a bait to fish that most guys, any other guys, can't get to with their big baits. The reason is they throw them out there, they let them sink down, they start to reel them, those rates ride up. They start coming up. They follow the line quicker. I mean, your line is up at the top of the boat. You can't stop that. You can't stop where your line and your reel meet the boat, meet the water. But as they reel, their baits are starting to come up faster. That bait will sit there and stay low, and it's a heavy weighted, you know, glide bait, and so it's running real low, real deep. And what I believe, it's going to call up a lot of those fish, like I did at Amistad, that are sitting deep, and all they see is a shadow of something passing over their head, you know. But it's in 20-25 foot of water versus you know, the traditional 8, 10, 12 at the most of the glides that are out there right now. So that's the exciting thing about these baits. The Vipers and the Venoms, you can change the weight. If you take all the weights out of it, it's a floating bait. You can actually make that thing flip across the surface. You have a top water bait, much like the lunker plunkers. You know, something that's a big bait that's up on the surface, except this is 10 times better because it's spitting water with its tail. So I wish I could show you the videos of the stuff we took today, but these things are insane when they're floating. Then you start adding that weight and it starts to sink. And when you load it up, man, it's sinking like a rock. That's a super versatile swim bait. And that's the best part about this bait.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you know, that's the one thing about the B Venom and the B Viper is that, you know, at Livingston Lures, we got it all in one bait for $39.99. It's debuting $39.99 for EBS MultiTouch version. You know, and talk a little about being able to change the sounds. I mean, you're able now with our EBS MultiTouch technology to change to match the hatch exactly using real biological sounds.
Yeah, if you're selling them for $39.99, you're selling them way too cheap. Because I know what the mothers and the Gancrafts are going for. I'm going to call timeout right here, because there might be a problem with our pricing, Nick. For everything we got in these baits, that's a little bit less expensive. That's a lot less expensive than it should be. This bait, first off, obviously you can change the weight in the thing. Then you can actually rotate your sounds. You can shut it off. If you don't want this to make any sounds like all the other glides out there, all the other big baits, big swim baits out there, you can just shut this thing off, because you can rotate the sounds as you hold, and it has a micro board in there, and you're allowed to sit there and take this, put the original sound in there, the sound that the EBS technology always has. You can put a shad sound in there, or you can put a larger game fish sound in there, and you can shake it off all together. And that's the key, is that this thing has 3 different sounds. I call it 4 sounds, because the 4th sound is no sound at all. It's the sound of silence. So if you're fishing with a guy and he's actually catching fish on another bait, and you think this thing is hurting you because it's making noise, you can just shut it off. But I highly doubt that's going to happen. He's going to be trying to figure out how to turn his bait on, but it's not going to work out so well.
Awesome. Yeah, the advent of EBS sound technology, being able to add and enhance your presentation and help you catch more fish. Oh, that's awesome, Byron. We're going through, we got a lot of good comments, a lot of good questions here from everyone. We really appreciate all the viewers asking questions and partaking in our interactive seminar. Now another question here from anglers is that, working that bait on surface, you throw in that, with the Livingston, with our B Viper, B Venom, you can take that and take all the balls out and fish on the surface. Do you use it as a topwater bait?
Absolutely. And when you see what it does, this bait is unbelievable, because it has that tail. I gotta take this off. This tail that we have on this thing, this soft, big plastic tail, we weighted it in such a way that the Vipers and the Venoms, when you throw that thing on the surface, it's weighted towards the front, so it actually rides a little bit like this. It rides at that angle, and it kicks water. So it's literally spitting water as you pump the thing. And there's a new cadence. I got to tell you this: when you're throwing this thing on top, these baits have taught me how to fish them differently. Just in the R&D we've been doing and prototyping these things, I've seen something. I've learned something about it. When you throw it out there with no balls in it, you want to hold the rod up and you want to pop this thing, and you almost like want to do this, like this high stroking. It's like a high stroking technique, and you're popping this thing with your rod up. You're using monofilament for sure, because when I'm throwing this thing on top, I want it to stay on top. I don't even want fluorocarbon to start sinking the nose of it down. So the number one key, if you take all the balls out of these things, throw it with monofilament, hold the rod up, and what I call high stroke it, where you pop this thing and the bait goes whoosh, and then it kicks back like this. And as it's swashing back and forth, it's like spitting water. The tail and the back of it's spitting water out. So it's the craziest thing. And until we get those videos out there and show people what this is, it's got all of us at Livingston freaking out, because we're doing this and we're like, God, do you see what that thing's doing? And we've never seen a bait for it like that. And I showed the guys that I cast. I made a home video of it on my phone. I showed Trevor Bannis, Steve Kennedy, a bunch of guys that I cast, and they were losing their mind over what they were seeing, which is a bait that just slaps the water with its tail like it's trying to go back and swim again, and it's popping water back and forth. And that's what the Viper and the Venom are doing with no balls in them. If you're high stroking it, you're just pumping it, high stroking it, and you're taking that rod and you're popping that thing, and it's slashing through the water. And that's before you add balls. And then if you add a bunch of balls to it, you got the deepest running swim bait on the market. That's amazing in one bait.
Awesome. Another question just specifically on using it as a topwater bait, are you more often twitching it, waking it, or can you even walk it?
It doesn't walk. It's not a walking bait. It's not like a spook. It's not like, because it has a joint. Here's the difference. This is a jointed bait. And I did not know. This was new to me, and I've never thrown a floating, jointed bait. Of course I've thrown the lunker plunkers and all the big hard baits that are just like this, but a solid one body bait. But as a jointed bait on top, that's not just you don't just straight reel the thing in and it just goes flop, flop, flop by side to side. You want to slash it. You almost want to get this thing to kick, because as you do that, you get this disruption in the surface, and then you start getting a slapping of the body against the water as it slaps. And this thing blows it away. Blows away that top water presence. It's not just a put your rod down and do the Zara spook thing and don't try walking it. I've played with it, and telling you the best action I'm getting out of it, hold that rod up and do like a high stroking. I don't even have a name for it, but I'm sure somebody will make up a name for it. But it's this high stroking, popping, holding the rod up, and just getting the thing to slash through the water, and it creates an action that is going to blow the fish away, because it blew me away.
Awesome, awesome. You know, another great question coming in from someone on a TVA lake. Of course, we've seen this advent of big gizzard shad swim baits on TVA reservoirs and things like that. So how are you using, say, the B Viper to your advantage on, you know, fishing when you're getting after those big, really big forage such as gizzard shad on Kentucky Lake? Thanks for the question coming in there on the live feed.
That is going to be the Viper 8 is a monster. And this thing, when you see this thing in your hand and you see the profile of it, it is a really, it's a big gizzard shad bait, and I'm putting it back together right now, but it's a big gizzard shad bait that just absolutely creates a bigger profile. You're gonna need a bigger rod. You're not gonna get nearly as many bites, but and we're gonna have these incredible colors. But you got to go, when you go gizzard shad, I had the same thing at Gunnersville. When I was throwing a gizzard shad bait, I had to throw the biggest baits I had. You know, and I didn't have, probably, I could have gone bigger than that. But again, I'm in a Bassmaster Elite event. Do I really want to throw a 12 and 13-inch Bassmaster Elite event? Because chances are I'm going to hook some big ones, and chances are, because I'm not even allowed to use a net, I'm going to get a handful of hooks. I'm going to have a fish that's alongside the boat thrashing his head, and this 12, 13, 14-inch bait is going to be flying all over the place. That's a big bait. This gizzard shad 8 that we have, this Viper 8 is as big as I think you want to go when you're fishing gizzard shad, and you just got to throw that bigger rod. You got to be, maybe you're not going to get as many bites as the other guys, but boy, if you're fishing for the 5 right bites to win a tournament or have a fun day, don't put it down. I mean, just don't put it down. Throw it and throw it and throw it until, you know, you get the bites you want, because that's my motto in these small these one-day tournaments where it's 5 fish, you're not fishing for points. I mean, why not just go for it? Why not just throw the biggest bait you can and say, you know what, I just need 5 good bites, and I'll throw it all day long for 5 good bites, instead of settling into a Carolina rig or throwing a drop shot out there or picking up a spinnerbait. I mean, you know, if you're trying to win, leave all those at the garage and just put your swim baits in your boat and go fishing.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you know what? We're getting to the end of this seminar here. You know, we don't want to keep you guys too long. You know, we're trying to shoot for 45 minutes or so, but we've got a lot of great questions coming in. You know, and we really want to reward you guys for coming out and you know, actually hanging out with us here, our first ever Livingston live stream. And you can use the gift card code GIFTCARD25. All of you guys get 25% off Livingston gift cards over here in the next couple days. Use that gift card code. You can pre-buy, you know, your swim baits. You can either save it for, you know, swim baits come out here in January or February, or you can use it now and use it as a stocking stuff for your favorite fisherman, or even treat yourself.
We're selling them too cheap. Hold on. We got to raise the price. I thought we were going to sell these things for more than $39. That's crazy. You know, we all know what swim baits cost. So we got every great feature you can put into a swim bait, and I think they're going to be shocked when they see these things. And, you know, thanks Livingston for listening to everything that I could possibly I could possibly dream of, you know, built into one bait. And I hope the anglers love it as much as I've loved, you know, developing it and working with all the guys there at Livingston, you know, that have been amazing at making the changes and the alterations. This bait is just, it's gonna change a lot of things in the swim bait world, and that's exciting to be a part of it. So if we're giving away a $25 gift card?
Yeah, well, it's a $25 gift card, and you're getting 25% off that gift card. So you can buy that card. You can actually save on that $39.99, our EBS MultiTouch swim bait. You can save on that when they come out in January, February timeframe. Or you can treat yourself right now and go get one of our Team Livingston series or Pro series, 25% off.
Yeah, if you're shopping right now, get jerkbaits, because those things are hot. Those Team Livingston jerkbaits are insane, and I know Hank Cherry did a lot of work on those. And that's what I love about Livingston. You know what Livingston does is when they send me the jerkbait, I literally write, send to Hank Cherry, and I put it back in the box, and I give it back to you guys. I don't go test it, because I'm not going to tell Livingston what exactly a jerkbait needs. And what I love is Hank got one of my swim baits, and I think he did the same thing. He said, send this back to Byron, because he goes, if Byron likes it, he's like, I've been fishing them for 20 years, it's saltwater, freshwater, and I'm just a swim bait freak. But every one of us has a thing that we love, and Livingston says, if you can dream it, we can build it. And that is so cool because it's allowing me to take everything I've ever loved in all the baits I've ever known, and then things I've dreamed of that aren't in any baits, and put them all into one bait, and then we're selling it for 25% of what most swim baits are going for right now, and that's amazing. You can buy 4 of these for what it costs to get one of the other guys, those big baits, those big live baits on the web and everything. So it's a heck of a deal.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you know what? Before we sign off here, everyone wants to know why they should throw swim baits. Why? Give it, one quick reason. Another question come in here. Why throw swim baits? Why pick one up and start throwing it if you've ever been afraid to throw big baits?
I'll tell you what I love about going to these shows is meeting guys that asked me that question and then they become addicts. It is addicting. It is fun. It is unlike anything else you'll experience, because when you get a big bait or even a medium, if it's a 5 or 6 inch swim bait, 7 inch swim bait, the fish freaks out, man. The fish goes nuts when they hit that thing. When they buy it, it's like a shark attack. It's like you're throwing a baby seal, and a great white is eating your baby seal at the end of your rod. That's what's going on out there. And you're not allowed to go fish with baby seals, but this is like fishing with baby seals for bass. And that's what swim bait fishing is. It becomes a passion because you're throwing a bigger bait than almost everybody else out there. You're giving the fish something they just don't see a lot of. They don't see a lot of this. And guys that throw them for an hour and put them down are just doing a major disservice to swim bait fishing, because it's something you got to stick to. If you read about Aaron Martins and drop shotting, you go out drop shotting, and man, you can catch a fish at your local farm pond in an hour, drop shotting after you read about Aaron Martins, in your magazine. If you read about swim bait fishing, you got to go out and put the time in to make it work. And I know a lot of guys that have thrown it for a while, elite guys, and they put them down. I'm not going to put it down, and there's times where you will cave everybody else's skulls in when they're on the swim bait bite, and you can sit there and just dominate the lake with the big bass that are chewing on big baits.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Byron, you know what? We really appreciate you coming on Livingston Live. And, look out, guys, for the next coming year. We're going to be having webinars every single month featuring your favorite Livingston Lures pros, talking about how can they help you become a better fisherman? How can they help you learn new tactics, new techniques? And we're really excited about this, Byron. And we'll be touching base with Byron again probably later in the year or throughout the year. You'll be able to see these guys on tour and learn from the best. Now, Byron, before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, you promised me I get to do this again in June, right? Because I want another shot at this. I want to do this. I want to fish a few elite events. I want to go out and fish halfway through the year, and come June, you made a date with me, Nick. Nick, promised that I get to come out, and so I'm calling you out right now in June, after we've had a fun, and we got these things packaged, and people are throwing them, and people are at Bass Pro Shops and all the other stores checking them out, and Tackle Warehouse, and buying them online. I mean, when they're buying these things and people have them, that's when I want to be able to come back and say, let's talk then. So let's revisit this after those baits get out there, because I want to hear other people tell me about what they're seeing with the baits, and more importantly, I just want to find out how it's going. I want another chance at this. This has been a lot of fun. So thanks, Nick, and thanks everybody for watching. I can't wait to do it again in June, Nick.
Awesome. Well, hey, Byron, we'll try and fit you in maybe around June. We'll see. So thanks for joining us, Byron. Everyone, thanks so much for having a great time with us on Livingston Live. Thank you for showing up, showing your support, learning how to use swim baits to your advantage. Now, everyone, like I said, you do get a little prize at the end of this. Gift card 25. Use that coupon code. You can buy Livingston Lures gift cards for 25% off. Save now. You can go get the swim baits when they come out in January and get them at a discount, or it's a perfect gift. So use gift card code gift card 25. Get yourself a big discount. It's only valid here for the next 24 hours. 24 hours, that's it. Guys, you know what? We really appreciate you showing up and coming out with us. Till next time, Livingston Live. Check us out next month. We'll have Randy Howell in the house talking early season cranking. Good night, everyone.